Hello, it's Ritchie Knox, and you are tuned into Virtuous Teacher. In this episode, I'll be asking a very important question. Do you want to change your students' lives? I really want to know. Why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself through the agony of being a teacher? What's the root cause of this thing you're doing? That is what we'll be talking about in this episode. Before we do, please check out the new Virtuous Teacher shirts. Really awesome. You can go to bhshirts.com. That is my shirt company website. Or you can email me directly at merch@virtuousteacher.com. Yes. Also, check out the descriptions for ways to connect and support my initiatives. All right. So I have to start with this question. Why do you teach? And there could be a myriad of different answers, but I would like to go with two answers. Is it money or is it impact? Even if it is something else, is it money or impact? Why do you teach? Is it to accumulate money for retirement? Is it to accumulate money for trips? Because I am of the very small minority that believe that a teaching career is really awesome financially. I do like the fact that we get so many days off during the year. I like the fact that we get some snow days off. And we also get this long summer vacation paid. I think that's pretty awesome. All right. So that's where I stand when it comes to the financial aspect. But, why do you do it? Is it for the financial gain or is it for impact? Are you teaching because you want to impact young people's lives? That's the question. And you might be somewhere in the middle, kind of like I am. I'm a little bit of both. I am doing it for the financial gain. All right. And I'm also doing it to impact lives. But if you had to place your chips on one side or the other, which side would you place your chips? That's the question. I don't know what the answer is for me. Can I start there? But anyway, do you want to change lives? And what I mean by that, I mean that when you encounter these young individuals at these various states in their lives, do you desire to feed them or give them skills or tips or techniques to get through this thing called life? And I'll put it this way. Let me help you answer this question. Which do you value more? Do you value the process of teaching students outside of your subject matter? For example, when your students come to you, yes, you are the leader of a subject and it is your responsibility to pass on your knowledge of that subject to your pupils. That is true. But do you ever find yourself giving them small nuggets just to get through life? Teaching them things that do not necessarily correlate with your subject matter. Do you do that quite frequently? Give people advice. I think I told a young man last week to do one thing at a time. That has nothing to do with my subject matter. But I realized that he was fumbling over two different tasks. And I said, hey, just a little advice. Just focus on one thing at a time. And I feel like the way I said it to him, in 5 to 10 years from now, he'll remember it just randomly. And he'll say, you know what? I'm not doing either of these things good. So let me just focus on one thing at a time, per Mr. Knox. Or are you someone who kind of just runs your classes through like, hey, teach all your content, next class, teach all your content, next class. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not sure how it's being communicated, but you're about your business. You don't do much more than what you're supposed to do. Are you someone that at 3 o'clock or 2:30 or whenever your shift is over, the minute is over, you bolt out the door and you're like, look, you turn your work computer off, you put no disturbances on your email, block or whatever. And it's like, I don't want anything to do with or with school at all. Is that more your stilo? Do you take Fridays off? Because it's payday. All right. If you take Fridays off, you take payday off, then you're definitely on the money side of things. Neither of these sides are more noble than the other, because I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. If you're there to get your money, well, I would imagine that while you might not value, school necessarily. Apparently, you're trying to get that money to do something. Now, I hope it's not to just go and throw it at a casino. But if I envisioned you correctly, it could be that, hey, I'm getting this money to create a house for my family or to invest so that I can create generational wealth. I don't know, right? That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. As far as the impact side, perhaps it's that you want to help underprivileged students. Maybe you teach at a school with a demographic that has low socioeconomic status, and you really want to give back to that cause, right? Maybe you can see yourself and your students and say, you know what, I've been there and I can guide these people through. Maybe you're a counselor and you're doing this because you want to provide strategies for people that are very young people who don't really know how to cope with their emotions and their physical and mental states. So I can understand both sides. And like I said, if I'm being transparent, I'm a little bit of both. Yes, I want to impact my students, but you better have my money. you better have my money. And here's the thing. Here's how you know that you're not the money side. Would you do your job? Because I know somebody is listening to this and they're like, Mr. Knox, really? You're both? You can't say you're one dominant over the other. How can you not say that you want to impact your students? You're doing a freaking podcast / video blog. I mean, how can you pick one or the other? So my retort to that would be to ask you this. Would you do your job? Let's say you're on the impact side of things. You're doing your job because you want to impact people. Would you do your job with with all the complications that come with it? Would you do it for a full week unpaid? And I'm not talking about back pay. They'll pay you when they get it. I mean, just do it for free. I'll do an entire work week free without any financial incentive. Would you do that? If the answer is yes, then you're definitely on the impact side of things. So I'm going to challenge you a little further. Would you do it for a month? Would you work for a month without any compensation financially? Would you do that? Because if so, you're certainly more impact than I am. All right. I want to ask this question to everybody. How long would you do your job if you were not paid? How long could you go? How long could you last? That's a question I want everyone to answer in the comment section. Please. How long would you do your job if you weren't paid? That's the question. I'll save my answer for the comments. Like if somebody actually comments that, I'll reply to that person with my answer. Or maybe I'll say it at the end of the video. I just don't want my answer to influence anybody. That happens a lot with my wife. She just takes my answer. All right, anyway. Here's how you change the lives of your students. So if I'm being honest, I am a little both, but I'm more partial to impact. I would say it's more like 35-65. That's me, okay? 35-65 is the answer. And I do have some tactics and tips for those individuals who might be more on the money side. And they might desire a few tips on how to start to kind of maneuver into that change agent. I think that's what they call it. All right, so here's how you change the lives of your students. All right, start the change process, which takes time. And this is how you start that change process, by creating opposition to toxic behaviors. This is how you change a student. A student is going to come to you in their rawest form, and they're going to be their rawest and most truest self. And if you want to change their lives, because perhaps you can see that this student is more than likely going to go off the deep end. We've seen those students where you're like, you're young right now, but with this particular disposition and the way that you carry yourself, you're going to get in trouble at some point. And if you want to create change in that student's life, I believe that one of the best things you can do is to create opposition to their toxic behaviors. And then, sit back and wait, because it's going to get explosive. All right, which brings me to my next point. After initiating the change process, or war in some cases, consistently reinforce expectations. Now, I said war because, no one likes change. Change is one of the most difficult things to contend with. And while change is inevitable, it is still not pleasant, right? Right now, everyone is comfortable with a certain routine, but, it's change that causes you to tap into version of yourself that you maybe like to kind of reserve for, never, right? So when you start that process of change or opposition towards toxic behaviors, you have to give it some wait time. I think that a lot of people in today's society, they've lost sight of what that process entails. If you're creating anything, change, a baby, a garden, artwork, it takes time. And I think that this generation is certainly opposed to time. I'm going to just put it that way. I think that we live in a microwave culture, right? Where people want instant gratification. But, when it comes to change, obviously, that's just not how it works. Okay. So after initiating change in your students via creating opposition to their toxic behaviors, consistently reinforce those expectations. Don't expect them to have it mastered because you've taught it once. Okay, they're going to come in and they're going to try you again. Then, you're going to have to reinforce the consequences, reinforce the lessons, reinforce the instructions over and over and over again. And while they may not notice that they're changing, if you just have the ability to do so, to compare where they are at that particular moment versus where they started, they would see drastic changes. It's crazy. And I think the best analogy that I can give is the gym. Okay. If you were to go to the gym every day for 30 days and just continue to reinforce the process of working out every single day for 30 days, at the end of 30 days, you may or may not see any difference in your physique and things of that nature. But if you were to compare yourself to where you were when you started, I'm sure you would see difference. And the difference would stem from the reinforcement of every day going to the gym and reinforcing that process. And at the very least, we can say that if nothing changed physically, which I would argue is impossible, we can say that you are more involved, because to go to the gym every day for 30 days does require commitment. So you change for the better no matter what. So I think reinforcement is certainly one of those underrated things. It's like, okay, I told him that he couldn't do this, and then, maybe he stopped for that class. I'll give you a great example. I have one student who is just a terror. Let me tell you, I've had him for 2 years now, and he hasn't, it's just rough. He's just one of those students. But I tell you, I called his parents 2 days ago, and it was because he was doing all kinds of stuff, just all over the place, out of his seat, hitting, throwing. So I called his parents, and when I called his parents, he sat there for the rest of the class with a little grumpy face, and all right, good. I'm glad you feel that way. I'm glad you're upset, because I'm not going. One of us has to change right now, at least enough. I have to either change and letting you do what you're doing, or you have to change in a way that allows you to get through my class. So somebody has to change now, and we'll continue to change process as we go. So nevertheless, he comes in today, and I'm thinking that, like, wow, it's like I didn't even call his parents. He goes right back into the same behavior. But you know what I did? I went right back into the exact same consequences. That's it. And he had that same look on his face. And I think by this point, he's starting to realize, you come back in my class in 2 days doing the same thing, guess what? It's going to be the exact same consequence. In fact, I'm lying. It's going to be even more consequences. In fact, even today, I didn't just call his parents, because I realized that wasn't enough. I called his parents and sent a referral to the administrators, because I'm like, okay, we have to continue this process, because I'm hoping at some point he'll realize, I'm not playing. You're going to have to change. I'm not going to sacrifice the culture in my classroom for one student. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to sacrifice somebody else's education because you want to be babysat. I'm not doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet your toxic behaviors with opposition. That's it. Next, anticipate, even welcome resistance. Now, I'll be frank with you. His behaviors are toxic. And you have a student very similar to what I'm talking about right now. You know that. But you have to anticipate it. You have to even enjoy it. You have to welcome it. For example, it's been 2 classes in which I've had to call his parents. And in the second class, I had to also contact an administrator via email and just document his behavior and pass it over to them, But I'm incredibly happy and ready to enjoy the process of going into that next class and him trying me again. I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm welcoming it. I anticipate it. I think he is going to come in. You know why I'm excited about it? Because I know that no one is probably going to take the time that I'm going to take to fix him. And I'm not saying he's broken, but what I am saying is He lacks the ability to sit in a classroom for an hour without doing anything that is destructive to the environment. So that part of his, his character is broken. I mean, I would imagine that as an adult, if he can't sit in one place and do one singular task, it could create some issues. And right now, he has the bandwidth or even the rope to play around with. But I can imagine him as an adult. That's not going to work. You see, everyone wants to handle these children with gloves and pillows and let's be really nice. But the minute they cross the 18-year-old mark and they make some of these weird bonehead decisions, society throws them in a freaking jail, in a cage, or they throw them outside on a pavement. So it's like, where are those kid gloves? I mean, they disappear, right? So I just like to just be frank now. The young man is on the wrong path, and I'm going to take the time to deal with him. You want to know why? Because I'm getting paid to do it. And yes, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, impact. While I'm not getting paid any extra for going through these particular processes, which is, providing consequences, because that's an extremely great motivator. All right. When you know that there is a consequence awaiting your actions, it will motivate you to do the right thing. For example, if it were not for jail, which is a very strong motivating consequence, I would go rob a bank right now. Straight up. OK, I'm sorry. I'm just joking. That's a joke. But the point is, consequences are incredibly, valid when it comes to change. So anyway, the point being, anticipate and welcome that resistance. It's like, turning something. And we've all been in a situation when we had to, turn something, pull something that's pulling back. You ever had that happen? I want to say a tug of war is the best analogy I can give. But you're tugging and it's going to pull back. So what if you anticipate it? What if you welcome it and you're already braced for it? When it happens, when that resistance happens, you won't be caught off guard. What happens if you're in a tug of war? You don't know the other side is about to really pull. You can fall on your face. But when you're anticipating, you're ready for it, and you're grounded, and your feet are planted into the ground, you're firm. That pull or that resistance just doesn't do much. It doesn't do enough to knock you off balance. So when I say anticipate the resistance, I mean get balanced emotionally. For example, that student that you're thinking about, as I talk about the student I'm talking about, when he comes into your class, she comes into your class, or even the person I'm talking about comes into my class, I'm already balanced. I've already had conversations with myself. All right, you know what's about to happen. You know what you're about to deal with. Make sure you got your filter on. Make sure you have your emotions stabilized because you know it's coming. And that is so much better than expecting perfection and then that student coming into your classroom and catching you completely off guard. All right. Completely off guard. And now you're yelling at them. You're saying things that you probably shouldn't say. You called them stupid by mistake, right? So we don't want that. And I think we stop that by being prepared and anticipating. Next, speak to them in future tense, or rather speak to the future version of them while in the present. This is a really effective technique. Even though that student might be behaving like a bonehead, you still speak to the future version of them. You still call them a scholar. You still call them sir or ma'am. You still say thank you, please, even though they don't deserve it. Even though you would rather say scram or get lost, you still be kind to them. You still be nice to them because they're in the process of learning. And, this is something I think is pretty obvious. You're the adult, they're the child. And you know how this works. They have way more wiggle room than you have as an adult. Okay. That's just the nature of psychology. That's the nature of life. If you both run to your principal and you say, he called me stupid, and then the student says, he called me stupid, it's pretty much going to go in their favor. And that's just how it works. Right. So speak to the future of them. Speak to the future, or I should say, speak to who you expect them to be, who you want them to be. This is why I always call my student scholar. I don't care whether or not they behave like a scholar. It doesn't make a difference to me. While in the present, call them scholars, thank them, give them roles, give them jobs. This is something that happened today. I asked students, hey, is there any student who would like to help me out? I had to pass back some papers. And it's always the worst kids who raise their hand. And part of me said to myself, look, You know, so-and-so is going to start an argument over here. You know, he's going to tease a kid who had a low score. You know, don't pick these kids. But then I thought to myself, I have to prepare them. I have to treat them like they're already where I want them to be. So I gave them the job, right? I gave 4 students the job, and all 4 students were students that I think could have definitely destroyed the job. And I'll be frank, 3 of the 4 actually got through it. One of them did exactly what I expected him to do. But the bigger point is 3 of them still got through. 3 of them still did the job. And I think what it did was it showed that I have confidence in them, and it showed them that, you know, they can do something besides getting in trouble. So I put my faith and my chips on the future version of them rather than, you know, backing out because I pretty much was, you know, predicting what they might do. So I would say, you know, give them roles. Notice or highlight all positive decisions, no matter how small. You know, one of the most effective things you can do when it comes to students who have, I would argue that they have, you know, toxic behaviors. Let's use that word, is to notice the small things. You know, they do something kind or they do something nice. To notice that, I think, is incredibly impactful. Ask yourself, have you ever been in a situation where somebody thanks you, right? And you think to yourself, what did I do? And you ask them, so why are you thanking me for? Oh, because I heard that you gave, you know, so-and-so, whatever, you know, you know what I mean. I can't think of the last time it's happened to me. It's been so long. And that's the point. It doesn't happen often that people thank me for small gestures, right? You got to do something above and beyond for people to notice. But I think we've all at least one time in our life was thanked for something that we didn't expect that person would thank us for. And imagine how impactful that was if you can remember back to that point. For me, I don't remember the exact action that required or necessitated the thanks or whatever, but I do remember how I felt. Okay, I remember feeling like, you know what, maybe I should do that more often. So when students do things, especially if they exhibit toxic behaviors, it is so impactful to just notice it and highlight it. One thing I did this week that I can share with you is I gave out an assignment, and one student who drives me crazy, doesn't, you know, just know how to sit down, don't know how to close his mouth, drives me crazy. But he somehow, some way, I cannot tell you how this happened, he got his work done faster than everybody. All right. And my assignments, they happen in tiers. You got one part of the assignment, and once you finish with that, you go to the next part of the assignment. And then when you finish with that, you go to the next part. I think that's such an effective style of lesson planning when it has layers. And it's funny because if you set it up in parts, like, okay, this part gets you to this part, gets you to this part, you'll kind of find it hilarious when some students get stuck at part 1. It's not hilarious to see them fail, but it's just kind of cool to see, you know, that they realize I can't even get crayons until I draw my outline first. That's what I mean. Let's say, you know, you need an example. I'll have a 3-part assignment. The first part is drawing an outline. The second part is once you finish the outline, you get crayons. The third part is once you finish the outline and you color it with crayons, you have to cut it out and glue it to a piece of construction paper, right? So that's 3 different tiers. And, you know, it works twofold. In one aspect, it makes people feel like, you know, oh, I'm accomplishing something. Once you finish part 1, okay, I'm on part 2. And they kind of use it as a, you know, a teasing mechanism. You know how kids are. Like, I'm on part 2. You still on part 1? Oh, dang, how long you going to take? You know, then they get through that. They get to, you know, tier 3. And the student that I'm talking about, he had got to tier 2 faster than everybody. And I never expected that because he talks so much. But I highlighted that and I showed everyone. And it was kind of wonky. It was a little off. But the point is, he felt good about it. He was like, oh, wow, I'm getting praised for working. I'm getting praised for working, for crying out loud. This is a student who probably gets in trouble a lot more than, you know, he would, you know, care to. And here he is getting praised and getting, you know, shown, or his work is being shown to an entire class because he's actually working. Now, what do you think that's going to do? That's going to inspire him to work more naturally. Okay. And it felt good for me, too, because I'm like, yo, I've been, you know, giving this kid a lot of, you know, pushback and providing a lot of consequences per their behavioral choices. And I finally get to do something nice for the student because I genuinely want to do that. So that was great. Next, be patient with them. Showing grace when inconsistencies arise. Now, if you're going to start the process of impacting and changing students' lives, you have to be patient. You have to be patient. You have to show grace. You know what grace is? It's space to make mistakes without harsh criticism. All right. Now, certainly you want to provide feedback. You want to, provide opposition, but you also want to provide grace. You want to give them the space to make errors should they do so. This definitely lends strongly into my next point. Never show anger throughout the change process. Nothing reverts change like anger. Nothing stops growth like anger. So, you're working with a student, you realize, you anticipate that they're going to come in and do the exact same thing again. The last thing that you want to do is show anger. If you can show grace and show patience, you'll get much further. Okay. Use yourself as an example. Let's say you're taking up a new hobby, piano. Let's go with piano. All right. And you are really, really bad at it. And you have two professors. Okay. One professor is patient and they're kind and they realize they've told you not to press this key at this time and you keep doing it because it just feels right, but it's wrong, right? Which teacher is more effective? The one who says, look, I understand you really, really like pushing that key, but you have to stop pushing that key. And I knew you was going to push that key today. I knew you was going to push it. But you know what? It's okay. You make mistakes and you're going to get it. You just keep trying your best because you are already an aficionado. You're already a master pianist, and it's going to take you some time. You have to give yourself some space to. What if they talk to you that way? All right, versus that one teacher's like, oh my gosh, not again. Really? How many times do we have to go through this? It's driving me crazy. I'm so upset. You know what? Just go home. You can go home right now. I'm over it because you're hard headed. What if you see the difference? Did you feel the tonal shifts that you had when you heard those two expressions and? Did you feel that? Because I did. And that is the importance of giving grace. That is the importance of never showing anger throughout the change or impact process, because the minute you show anger, you revert the process, you revert the change. And this is why we have to show patience as teachers. And it should be rather easy because, what's funny? I'll tell you the funniest thing. The funniest thing is talking to a teacher who allows it depends on your demographic. I realize that. But this kind of applies to everybody. It's hilarious to see a teacher complain about a teacher. Let me say this cleanly because my brain is coming up with it. I want to make sure I say it right. It's hilarious to see or hear a teacher talk about a student that's able to unravel them. It's hilarious because either it's a younger student, like, a kid, middle school, high school, whatever, younger, or the student is less intellectually advanced. Okay, so even if you teach college, here you are getting rattled by this kid who has not graduated from college, doesn't have any bills, any kids. They haven't lived a significant life enough to be able to rattle, or they shouldn't be able to rattle you, right? Because they're kids or they are still inexperienced or young. You should be able to see through their opposition and pushback and attitude and disrespect. You should be able to see through that and be like, you know what? They're a kid. How upset am I going to allow them to get me? I'll tell you a perfect example. Today, a kid called me a name, and it was a cuss word infused in the name that they called me. And I was so happy with myself. I was like, wow, I'm really a different teacher. I'm a different person because I literally said this. This is my words verbatim. Okay, what else? What else am I? What? That is not something that I could have pulled off in like my first or second year as a teacher. Like, okay, what else am I? Give me some more. Tell me more about myself. What else am I? It was hilarious. And it was so impactful for me. I felt so good. I'm like, I finally got to the point where a kid can bring up and conjure up the most disgusting name to call me. And it won't even affect me. Now I'm like, yo, that's completely different. It's almost like his little word bounced off my like I had a Kevlar vest on, like for slurs and words. And it just bounced right off. And it was deemed ineffective. But I always find it funny when I hear teachers, that student drives me crazy and he just doesn't this and that. I'm like, it's a kid, right? That's the equivalent of losing in the game of tic-tac-toe to like a baby. It's like, really got beat by a kid? Like, how did that happen? You have years and years of experience. You have years and years of life experience, educational experience. You let a kid unravel you? Hilarious. At least one person watching this allows this to happen way too much, allows, kids to come in and dictate their happiness. I'm gonna tell you, it happens because, I look at some of my colleagues. I'm like, why don't you come to work? It's because they're allowing the kids to drive them crazy. We had a teacher quit last year, and that's because they've allowed these kids to manipulate and drive them insane. I'm like, wait a minute. You do realize you're an adult, right? You do realize that these kids are really not equipped, or should not be equipped enough to unravel a full adult that's college educated. You do realize that. That shouldn't happen. I don't care what anybody says. Now, I do realize you're one teacher and you might have 5 kids just going in and drilling and drilling and drilling. But let me tell you, me versus 5 babies and anything, I'm winning. And that's the same way I look at classes. I'm like, I don't care if it's 30 of you all. I will divide and conquer. And you might win some classes, but let me tell you, you're not going to win the entire quarter. You're not going to win the entire semester. You're not going to win the entire game. You might score some points. You might get me on a bad day or what have you. But trust me, I'm going to regroup. I'm going to get myself together. I'm going to recalibrate. And I'm going to come back stronger than ever. And you won't have an answer to it because you haven't lived long enough. But I'll go back to the initial question. Why do you teach? Is it money or is it impact? And I told you that mine was somewhere in the 35-65 range. And I said I would answer this question. How long would I teach if not paid? I asked you too. I said, how long could you do your job as a teacher without being paid? And I said I would maybe share my answer in the comment section. But I've kind of, I'm going to take the challenge. How long could I teach without being paid? I'm the kind of person, I'm stuttering now. That means I'm about to lie. I'm the kind of person that loves a challenge. So, it's really difficult for me to answer that question in a black and white manner. But I'm going to be real with myself. I think if I'm being real with myself, the most that I'm willing to go is a month. I can do a month because I would feel in my heart that, you know what? I can do it. I'm going to give back. This is my sacrifice. I got into this profession to show that I'm the real deal. I got into this profession to show that I'm different from everyone else. And I often tell myself that I'm the best at this job. I'm the best at this profession. I tell myself that, even though it's probably the furthest thing from the truth, but I tell myself that, and I feel like that would kick in at some point. Like, really, you're only doing this for money? You're only doing this for money? Really? I will give it a month. After a month, some things would have to change. And also within a month, or after a month rather, bills will start to pile up, all that kind of stuff there will start to impact. But if someone were to say, listen, for as long, put it like this. This is a better way to put it. This is a great way to put it. I'm going to ask this question to everybody. Would you go 5 years without a paycheck teaching for the promise of $1 million at the end of your tenure? Could you do that? If someone said, I'll pay you $1 million in 5 years if you teach 5 years without pay, would you accept that challenge? Now, that doesn't mean you can't get another job after work. You might have to go pick up some shifts to pay your bills. Would you take that challenge? I'm going to ask you right now in the comment section. Let me know. Would you teach 5 years with no pay with the promise that after that 5 years was up, you'll be paid $1 million? Would you accept that challenge? That is a huge question. And as far as my answer, the answer is